I was standing just inside the front hall, my back to the staircase. When he raised his glass, the house was full, voices layered over one another, laughter moving from room to room. The dining table had been extended, linen pulled tight, place settings aligned as if this had always been the plan. It hadn't. My ex-husband stood near the fireplace with his new wife at his side. Her hand rested on his arm. People I recognized from our old life filled the space between us. Neighbors, friends, a few relatives. No one asked why I was there. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "It means a lot to start this chapter here." He paused, smiling, letting the room settle. "This house has a lot of history," he continued, "but tonight, it's officially ours." A few people clapped. Someone laughed. He looked directly at me then, didn't lower his voice. "This place is no longer hers," he said. "She moved on a long time ago." The words were clean, confident, delivered like a fact that didn't require discussion. I did not move. I kept my hands at my sides, and my feet planted on the tile where the hall met the living room. The marble underfoot was cool through my shoes. His new wife smiled tightly, as if the moment had been rehearsed. Someone near the kitchen shifted their weight. A glass clinked against a plate and then stopped. "We've made it ours now," he said. "Everything's been handled." He lifted his glass a second time. To moving forward, no one looked at me. The room went quiet in a way that felt deliberate, as if everyone was waiting to see whether I would say something that could be corrected or removed. I didn't. I let the silence stay where it was. "My name is Elena Kerr. I was 43 at the time, living in the same town I'd lived in for most of my adult life, and I had built a career that rewarded accuracy and patience. I worked in property compliance and asset oversight, not sales, not design, structure, documentation, the part of real estate that decides who has access and when. Most of my work happened quietly, on paper, with deadlines that did not move for anyone. By the time that celebration took place, I had been divorced for just over a year. I had not moved away. I had not fallen apart. I had kept the same office, the same routine, the same professional standing. The house they were standing in was not unfamiliar territory to me. I knew every addition, every permit, every revision that had ever been filed on it. I was not there by accident, and I was not confused about where I stood. If anyone in that room assumed otherwise, it was because they had never asked how the place had been held together. In the first place, my marriage was never built on grand gestures. It was built on agreement. We divided responsibility early and kept to it, because it made life function. He was visible, social, comfortable, taking up space. I handled the parts that required order, finances, filings, risk. When decisions had consequences that lasted longer than a conversation, they came to me. The house was the center of that agreement. We bought it together. I oversaw the purchase, the financing, the permits for every change that came after. When repairs were needed, I managed them. When tax assessments shifted, I handled the appeals. When insurance was renewed, my name was on the communications. This was not sentimental work. It was functional, and it kept the property stable through years when other things were not. The betrayal was not that he remarried. People move on. Structures change. That is not a moral failure. The breach was standing in that house and announcing, in front of others, that I no longer belonged there, as if belonging were a matter of opinion and not agreement, as if responsibility could be erased by confidence. There had been no discussion about access, no notice, no attempt to settle matters quietly or fairly, just a public statement delivered as a conclusion. I had met every obligation attached to that place. I had never abandoned it. I had never transferred my interest or released my role. This was not a personal slight. It was a claim made without authority. Looking back, it followed a pattern that had been present for years. Decisions declared after the fact, certainty used in place of verification. Fairness is not emotional, it is structural. For most of our marriage, I operated without spectacle, not because I was absent, but because the work I did functioned better without an audience. When we purchased the house, I handled the structure, I reviewed the deed language, I coordinated with the lender, I tracked the conditions attached to the mortgage and the timelines for compliance. He was present for the photos and the walkthroughs. I was present for the paperwork. Over the years, that division continued. Additions were proposed quickly. I verified zoning. Contractors were hired on handshakes. I required licenses and bonds. When a dispute arose with a neighbor over setbacks, I handled it through the town office and closed it without escalation. None of this was difficult. It was consistent. As his career shifted, he became more confident in declarations. Plans were announced before they were checked. Decisions were presented as final before they were documented. When questions came up, they came to me after the fact. I answered them. I corrected course. I did not argue in front of others. There were signs. Mail redirected without discussion. A contract signed with an assumed authority. That did not exist. A change to home insurance. That required reversal when coverage was misstated. Each instance was small. Together, they formed a pattern. I kept records, not out of distrust, but because records prevent confusion. Emails were saved, copies were filed, dates were logged. When the divorce was finalized, I did not rush to separate what did not require immediate separation. The house remained subject to the same obligations. Taxes were paid on time. Maintenance continued. Filings were made. My silence during that period was not uncertainty. It was sequence. There is a difference between reacting and waiting for the right moment to confirm what is already true. I had learned through years of work that systems reveal themselves when people move too quickly inside them. By the time he spoke with that level of certainty at the celebration, I had a complete record of how that certainty had been built and where it did not hold. The lever that mattered had been put in place years before the divorce and long before that celebration. When we bought the house, I insisted on a structure that separated use from control, not because I anticipated conflict, but because property lasts longer than moods. The title was held through a limited holding arrangement designed to protect the asset from personal disruption. It was boring, technical, approved without argument. The terms were clear. Occupancy was permitted. Alterations required consent. Disposition required compliance with a specific sequence. None of it was unusual. It was the kind of setup people agree to when they expect a house to outlive a marriage, or at least a phase of one. After the divorce, nothing was rewritten. There was no rush to change title or transfer control. The arrangement remained in place because it was still serving its purpose. Taxes were paid. Insurance was maintained. Filings were made on schedule. The conditions that governed control were not complex. Material changes required notice. Public representations required accuracy. Any action that implied exclusive ownership required documented authority. Those conditions were breached quietly at first. A representation made to a contractor. A statement included in a private invitation. A change requested without the required signature. Each instance was logged. Dates mattered. Sequence mattered. I did not intervene. I informed the administrator in writing and received confirmation of receipt. Nothing more was required from me at that stage. Under the terms of the holding arrangement, repeated breaches triggered a review, not a penalty. A review. Control shifted temporarily to the party responsible for compliance until conditions were met again. The shift did not require my request. It occurred automatically on paper, according to the agreement already in place. Once that shift happened, it could not be undone by conversation or consent. Restoration required formal correction over a specified period of time, verified by third parties. Months, not days. By the time he stood in that living room and declared the house ours, the system had already made a different determination. I had known it would. That was the point of building it that way in the first place. The meeting took place 10 days later in a conference room that overlooked the town green. I sat near the end of the table with my hands folded, my chair pulled in close. Across from me, my ex-husband sat too far back, one arm draped over the chair next to him. His attorney whispered something I couldn't hear. The administrator entered last and closed the door behind her. She did not sit down. "This is a formal review," she said, opening a folder. "We'll proceed in sequence." The room settled. Papers stopped moving. Even the air felt still. She read the property identifier first, then the date the holding arrangement had been executed, then the section governing representation and control. Her voice was steady, uninvested. My ex-husband shifted. "We've already been through this," he said. "The house is mine to use." She looked up at him for the first time. "Use is not control," she said. Then she looked back down. The next page was turned slowly. I watched the corner of the paper line up with the folder edge before she continued. "On 3 separate occasions," she said, "representations of exclusive ownership were made without authority." "That's not WHAD happened," he said quickly. "This is a technicality." "No," she said. "It's a condition," his attorney interjected. "We're prepared to correct any misstatements." The administrator shook her head once. "Correction is not retroactive." The room went quiet again. Not tense, decisive. She turned the folder so the table could see the page. "Under the terms of the agreement, these breaches triggered a review period. That period has concluded." My ex-husband leaned forward now. "And control currently resides with the compliance party," she said. "Until conditions are satisfied." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You knew this was coming," he said. I waited a beat before answering. "The terms were always there." My voice was even. I kept it short. He turned back to the administrator. "This can be fixed," he said. "I'll sign whatever is necessary." "Restoration," she said, "requires verified compliance over a 6-month period." "No exceptions." "6 months?" His voice rose. "That's unreasonable. It's documented," she said. He stood up then, pushing his chair back too fast. "This is my house." No one moved. I did not stand. I did not need to. "This is a review, not a negotiation," the administrator said. "Today's determination is final." For a moment, he said nothing. His jaw tightened. His attorney avoided his eyes. I looked down at the table. The folder was closed now. The clip was fastened. "I'm satisfied proceeding as stated," I said. The administrator nodded. And just like that, the meeting moved forward without him. The first response came through counsel. Within 2 weeks, a formal request for review was filed. It cited misinterpretation, procedural overreach, a claim of hardship. The request was logged, acknowledged, and denied without comment. The review period continued. A month later, access to the property was modified. Not eviction, not removal. Limitation. Keys were reissued through the administrator. Schedules were set. Third-party presence was required for any non-routine entry. The notice was delivered by email and certified mail. By the end of the quarter, insurance was updated to reflect the current control status. A planned renovation was paused pending authorization. Contractors were informed briefly that instructions would come from a different office going forward. There was an attempt to challenge that change. It failed quietly. Social effects followed more slowly. Invitations to host stopped arriving. Questions were redirected. Explanations became shorter. People adjusted their language without being asked. By the end of the year, he had moved out of the house. Not suddenly. Through forms, timelines, and scheduled access windows. The property remained occupied, but no longer centered around him. One third-party confirmation crossed my desk during that time. A compliance notice marked resolved, stamped and closed. No conditions remaining. No further action required. After that, there were no more filings, no more letters, no more requests for exceptions. The system had run its course. What followed was not a fall. It was a narrowing. Access became limited to what was documented. Presence shrank to what was permitted. Influence ended where authority had never been. I was not there to see any of it. I did not need to be. The record was complete. When it was over, it stayed over. The review period closed without incident. Compliance was verified. Control remained. Where the agreements had placed it from the beginning. Nothing required my input after that point, and nothing asked for it. I did not feel triumph. Triumph implies struggle. This was closer to alignment structures returning to their intended positions after a period of misuse. The house did not change. The walls held. The property continued to exist as it always had, subject to terms, maintenance, and documented authority. That was enough. One practical decision followed. A portion of the property's revenue was directed annually to a local housing legal clinic that handled title disputes and compliance reviews. It was not symbolic, it was functional. It reduced future confusion for people who did not know where to look. Justice does not require an audience. It requires boundaries that hold when tested. I have not spoken to him since the final confirmation was issued. There was nothing left to discuss. Our connection ended where it should have, at the edge of formal process. Time did the rest without effort. Some matters do not need revenge. They need structure. And once structure is restored, distance takes care of itself.